The Peloponnesian War was a long and destructive conflict fought in ancient Greece between two powerful groups of city-states. On one side was Athens and its allies, known as the Delian League. On the other side was Sparta and its allies, known as the Peloponnesian League. The war lasted for 27 years, from 431 BCE to 404 BCE, though tensions had existed for decades before the fighting officially began. It was a struggle not only for military power, but also for influence, fear, pride, and the future direction of the Greek world. Almost all Greek city-states were eventually drawn into the war. The conflict changed Greece forever and became one of the most famous wars in ancient history, largely because the historian Thucydides wrote a detailed work describing its causes, its events, and the behavior of people under extreme pressure. To truly understand the Peloponnesian War, we need to look at the background conditions in Greece during the 5th century BCE, after the Greeks had defeated the Persian invasions in 490 and 480 to 479 BCE. They emerged stronger and more confident. However, the cities of Greece were not unified under one government. Instead, each city-state, or polis, had its own laws, leaders, army, and traditions. Some were democracies, some were oligarchies, and some were ruled by kings or tyrants. Among these city-states, Athens and Sparta stood out above all others. Athens was a naval power, culturally vibrant, democratic, wealthy, and full of new ideas. Sparta was a land-based military state, harsh, disciplined, conservative, and respected for its unbeatable army. These two powers had cooperated against Persia, but once the common enemy was gone, fear and suspicion began to rise between them. Athens had formed the Delian League with many island and coastal Greek cities. The league was originally created to keep Persia in check, but over time Athens began to dominate it more like an empire. Athens collected tribute money from its allies, used it to build a strong navy, constructed grand buildings like the Parthenon, and sometimes forced reluctant cities to stay in the league. Sparta and its allies watched this growth with concern. They did not like the spread of Athenian power or Athenian democracy, which could inspire revolutions in oligarchic states allied with Sparta. Meanwhile, Athens was wary of Sparta's strict militarism and feared the possibility of a Spartan attack. The Greek world was slowly dividing into two sides, each suspicious of the other and expecting the worst. Tensions became more serious when conflicts began to break out among smaller states. Athens or Sparta would take a side, and small local quarrels suddenly became major international issues. One such trouble spot was Corinth, a powerful ally of Sparta. Corinth had disputes with Corcyra, a city allied with Athens. Athens helped Corcyra, and Corinth was angered. Then Athens defied another Corinthian ally, the city of Potidaea. As arguments escalated, the city of Megara, another Spartan ally, was hit with economic sanctions by Athens, which further increased hostility. In Sparta, many allies demanded that something be done about Athens. Some Spartans wanted peace, but others, especially Corinth, pushed for war. Finally, Sparta decided that Athens had broken previous agreements and voted to go to war. Athens, led by its most influential statesman Pericles, refused to back down. The moment for peaceful negotiation had passed. The war officially began in 431 BCE. Sparta relied on its strong infantry army, which was nearly unbeatable on land. Athens relied on its navy, which was the most powerful in the Greek world. Each side had a different strategy. Sparta's plan was simple: invade the region around Athens, called Attica, burn crops, and try to force Athens to fight on land. They believed that the Athenians would eventually come out from behind their walls and face them in battle. Athens' plan, designed by Pericles, was to avoid fighting Sparta's army on land and instead rely on the city's long walls, which connected Athens to its harbor at Piraeus. As long as the walls stood, Athens could receive supplies by sea. Meanwhile, the Athenian navy could attack Spartan allies along the coast, raid the Peloponnese, and put economic pressure on the enemy. Both sides believed they could outlast the other. In the early years of the war, Sparta repeatedly invaded Attica, burning fields and destroying villages. The Athenians refused to fight outside the walls and stayed crowded inside the city. This strategy worked militarily, but it created terrible living conditions. As thousands of people fled into Athens for safety, the city became overcrowded, dirty, and unhealthy. In 430 BCE, only 1 year into the war, a devastating plague struck Athens. The disease spread quickly among the packed population, killing tens of thousands of people, including soldiers, citizens, and even Pericles himself. This was a major blow. The plague weakened Athens' morale, damaged its economy, and removed its most capable leader. Despite this disaster, Athens continued to fight. Meanwhile, the war spread across the Greek world. Athens used its fleet to control the seas, protect trade routes, and pressure Spartan allies. Sparta tried to encourage rebellions within the Athenian Empire, hoping to force Athens to fight on many fronts. Some cities tried to break away, and Athens punished them harshly. One of the most famous events of the war was the Melian Dialogue, in which Athens demanded the neutral island of Melos join the Delian League. When the Melians refused, Athens killed the men and enslaved the women and children. Thucydides described this event to show how war can harden a society and make it cruel. After several years of fighting, both sides grew tired and neither had a clear advantage. In 421 BCE, a general from Athens named Nicias negotiated a peace treaty with Sparta, known as the Peace of Nicias. It was supposed to last 50 years, but from the start it was fragile. Many allies on both sides did not trust the agreement, and some refused to follow it. Hostility continued in smaller conflicts, and neither Athens nor Sparta felt entirely committed to the peace. The uneasy truce lasted only about 6 years before tensions flared again. One of the most dramatic events of the war came next, the Sicilian Expedition. In 415 BCE, the city of Syracuse on the island of Sicily became the focus of Athenian attention. Some Athenian leaders believed conquering Sicily would give Athens enormous wealth and influence. Others warned that the plan was risky and unnecessary. Despite the warnings, the Athenians voted to send a massive fleet and army to Sicily. The expedition was led at first by 3 commanders, Alcibiades, Nicias, and Lamachus. But even before the fleet reached Sicily, Alcibiades was accused of religious crimes and fled to Sparta, where he betrayed Athenian plans to the enemy. The Sicilian expedition turned into a catastrophe. The Athenians fought for 2 years but could not defeat Syracuse. Sparta sent help to the Syracusans, including a skilled general named Gylippus. In 413 BCE, the entire Athenian army and navy in Sicily were trapped, defeated, and destroyed. Many soldiers were killed, and thousands more were captured and forced to work in stone quarries under brutal conditions. The loss was unbelievable. Athens had spent enormous amounts of money, ships, and lives, and had gained nothing. The historian Thucydides described the Sicilian disaster as the greatest setback in Athenian history up to that point. The fall of the Sicilian expedition changed the balance of the war. Sparta now had the advantage. Encouraged by Alcibiades, who had turned against his homeland, Sparta established a permanent fort at Decelea in Attica, cutting Athens off from important resources. Sparta also received money from Persia, which allowed them to build a navy capable of challenging Athens at sea. The war entered a new, more intense phase called the Ionian War. Fighting now spread across the islands and coastal cities of Asia Minor, where both sides tried to gain control and influence. Athens, weakened but not defeated, struggled to rebuild its navy. Political instability made the situation worse. In 411 BCE, a group of oligarchs overthrew the democracy in Athens and established a short-lived government known as the 400. This government was unpopular, and within a few months a more moderate oligarchy, the 5000, took its place. Meanwhile, the fleet stationed at Samos declared loyalty to democracy and became almost a separate government. Alcibiades, having fallen out with Sparta, now helped the Athenian navy and worked his way back into Athenian favor. The political chaos of this period showed how deeply the war affected Athenian society. Despite all the setbacks, the Athenian navy won several important victories, including the battles of Cynossema, Abydos, and Cyzicus. By 407 BCE, Athens had recovered some strength, and Alcibiades returned to the city in triumph. But his success did not last long. After a minor failure, he was removed from command again. Athens then made a disastrous decision by appointing multiple generals to lead its fleet. In 406 BCE, the Athenians won the Battle of Arginusi, but a storm prevented the rescue of drowning sailors. The generals were blamed, put on trial, and executed, causing outrage and further destabilizing the government. The final blow came in 405 BCE at the Battle of Aegospotami. The Spartan commander Lysander, funded by Persian gold, surprised the Athenian fleet while it was beached and unprepared. Almost the entire Athenian navy was captured or destroyed in a single stroke. Without its fleet, Athens could no longer import grain or defend its empire. Spartan forces closed in, and Athens was besieged. After months of starvation, the Athenians surrendered in 404 BCE. The long walls were torn down, and Athens was forced to give up its empire and its fleet. Sparta declared itself the new leader of Greece. The end of the Peloponnesian War did not bring peace to Greece for long. Sparta tried to impose oligarchic governments on other cities, including Athens, where the ruthless group known as the 30 Tyrants briefly ruled. But Sparta's dominance was unstable. Many Greek states resented Spartan control, and new wars soon broke out. Eventually, Sparta would be challenged by Thebes, and later the rise of Macedonia under Philip II and Alexander the Great would reshape Greece altogether. The Peloponnesian War weakened all the major Greek powers and made it easier for outside forces to take control later. The war also had profound cultural and intellectual effects. Thucydides, who fought in the war before being exiled, wrote a detailed history that became one of the most important works of classical literature. His writing explored not only what happened, but why it happened. He described how fear, ambition, pride, and chance influenced human behavior. He showed how democracies and oligarchies behaved in crisis, how leaders made decisions under pressure, and how power can corrupt individuals and states. His work remains a major source for historians and political theorists today. In addition to Thucydides, other writers like Xenophon, Aristophanes, and later philosophers such as Plato reflected on the consequences of the war. The conflict revealed the fragility of democratic institutions, the dangers of imperial expansion, and the difficulty of maintaining peace among rival states. The war also inspired debates about justice, morality, and human nature. Some Athenians believed their empire had been necessary for security, while others thought it had been driven by greed. Some Spartans believed they had fought for freedom, while others saw how power changed Sparta over time. Economically, the war was devastating. Farmland was destroyed repeatedly, trade was disrupted. Thousands died in battle from disease or from starvation. Cities forced into the conflict lost generations of young men. Many communities suffered political upheaval, civil war, and social breakdown. Alliances shifted constantly, and trust between Greek states declined. Many cities turned to Persia for money, allowing the Persian Empire to regain influence and control over parts of the Greek world. The war showed how a long conflict can damage not only armies but entire societies. Culturally and psychologically, the war left deep scars. Athens never returned to the level of power it had held before. It remained an important cultural center, known for philosophy, drama, and education, but it no longer ruled an empire. Sparta gained power briefly but soon declined. The traditional balance between Greek city-states was destroyed, and no single city ever again dominated the Greek world the way Athens once had. Looking back, historians often wonder whether the war could have been avoided. Thucydides famously wrote that the real cause of the war was the growth of Athenian power and the fear that this caused in Sparta. Fear, he suggested, can make conflict almost inevitable. Yet many of the decisions made by both sides seem driven by pride, stubbornness, misjudgment, or panic. The Sicilian Expedition, in particular, is often seen as a tragic mistake that Athens did not have to make. If Athens had avoided that disastrous campaign, the war might have taken a very different course. The story of the Peloponnesian War has continued to fascinate people for thousands of years because it feels strangely modern. It shows how alliances can pull nations into war, how democracies can make poor decisions, how leaders can be bold or foolish, and how fear can drive people to conflict. It also shows how a long war can transform a society, changing values and behaviors in ways that are hard to predict. The war is not just a story of battles and strategies. It is a story of human nature under stress. Even though the war ended long ago, it remains a powerful lesson. It teaches that pride and fear can be dangerous, that wars are often harder to end than to begin, and that even the strongest powers can fall. It also shows how important wise leadership is, especially in times of crisis. Pericles' early strategy may have been sound, but the plague and later political decisions changed everything. Sparta's victory came at a great cost and ultimately weakened the entire Greek world, showing that even winners can lose in the long run. The Peloponnesian War is a reminder that conflict is rarely simple. It grows from many causes: fear, ambition, misunderstandings, alliances, and accidents. Once it begins, it can spread far beyond its original purpose and affect people who had nothing to do with its origins. It also shows how fragile peace can be, especially when great powers compete for influence. In the end, the war between Athens and Sparta was not just a clash of armies, but a struggle over values, ideas, and the future of Greece. Today, when we study the Peloponnesian War, we see not only an ancient conflict, but also a mirror reflecting the challenges of any era. Thucydides wrote that he believed his history was a possession for all time, meaning that it would remain valuable long after the events had passed. He was right. The war he described still teaches us about human behavior, leadership, and the consequences of political rivalry. It is one of the most significant and influential conflicts in history, not because of its scale, but because of what we can learn from it. In summary, the Peloponnesian War was a long and complex struggle between Athens and Sparta for power and influence in Greece. It grew from fear, rivalry, and political tensions. It involved shifting alliances, terrible tragedies, and surprising reversals. It weakened the Greek world and changed its history forever. And through the work of Thucydides and others, it remains one of the most carefully studied wars of the ancient world. It is a story filled with lessons about leadership, decision-making, ambition, and the human cost of war.